You are listening to the global network of podcasters dedicated to the pharmacy profession. Welcome to the Pharmacy Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Holistic Pharmacy Podcast. I'm your host, Marina Buksov, and I'm a functional medicine pharmacist in New York. I'm also a clinical herbalist and an integrative health coach specializing in mindfulness and empowerment. I'm on a mission to transform the way we approach healthcare by bridging the wisdom of traditional medicine with modern practice. And in this podcast, I will be highlighting guests who do just that. I'm constantly inspired by them, and I know you will be as well.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Holistic Pharmacy Podcast. I have another amazing guest in store for you today. Her name is Cortney Martinelli, and she's a powerhouse in the personal growth and business healing space, known for merging deep energetic mastery with practical business strategy. As the founder of Shine, a nationally recognized wellness and education center, and Spark 3, a nonprofit dedicated to empowerment, Cortney has helped thousands of individuals and entrepreneurs unlock their true potential. She's taught hundreds of people how to turn their side hustle into successful, thriving businesses, and has helped scale businesses to 6 and 7 figures with her proven frameworks. So without further ado, Cortney, welcome. I'd love to start with your origin story, how this all came together, how it was growing up, where you grew up, where you're based now. Tell me everything.
Oh, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I love being here with you and your listeners, and you give me like a brief overview of, the amazing community that you have. So I'm just grateful to be here. So thank you for having me. So yeah, I'll start by saying that, for over 30 years, I was living in a nightmare. So every morning I woke up trapped in this cycle of like panic attacks and constant anxiety. And I'm wondering if some of your listeners have experienced something similar, right? So I went to doctor after doctor, and all they really wanted to do was put a label on me and hand me a prescription. So for years, decades, I resisted, and I tried every supplement and natural fix. And to be honest, I didn't know what I was doing, right? But I finally caved. And that's when it went from bad to terrifying. And I ended up in the emergency room after a dangerous interaction between a supplement and a prescribed medication. And so as a healer, I know you understand my struggle out there, right? Because you've done this deep work, you've faced the wall of conventional advice, and you know how isolating that anxiety can be. Because you feel me because you've probably been me, right? So after getting out of the hospital, which was one of the lowest points of my entire life, I had this oh my gosh moment. I was determined to figure this out for good. So I dove into working with a Reiki master, and that's really where it all started. And I began to truly understand energy vibration, how to finally regulate my body after decades of living in fight or flight. And honestly, I'm an introvert, but I felt called to share this with anyone who would listen to me. And this was about 15 years ago. And at first I felt like an absolute fraud, a total imposter. I was just trying to heal myself. I was a total mess, right? And I heard this voice in my head. I know some of you have heard this voice in your head too. You are an imposter. What are you doing, right? But I moved forward anyways because I made a promise to myself. And I know some of your listeners out there have probably made a similar promise to themselves. And what I started noticing is the magic happened when I started working with others and channeling energy to them. The healing effects on me were exponentially more powerful. So eventually, after years of experimenting and working with thousands of clients, like a true system emerged. So I own an education and retreat center in Ohio. I was like telling you about that earlier. And we have 23 different modalities and certifications. And I realized the answer wasn't just one thing. It was a specific sequence, like a 5-part formula. And it delivered reliable results, at least for me and my clients, for years and years and years. So when I consistently use these 5 steps, I noticed that lives dramatically shifted. So now I've taught this technique for over 5 years, and I watch my students go from being healed to becoming a sought after healer. Because I love that journey. Going from healed to healer, that's truly what I have helped people do over the last 15 years.
Wow, what an amazing journey. And I want to just pause and reflect back that it takes awareness to even seek help for the constant anxiety and dread and overwhelm. And I think a lot of us have internalized it and accepted it as normal for so long that some people don't even realize that they may be in this constant fight or flight and survival mode, and they just may take it for granted. So I just kudos to you to seeking help for that and recognizing that this is not how it's supposed to be.
I literally have tingles when you say that, because it's so funny. What I would always say is, for the first 30 years of my life, I didn't realize that that's not how everybody lived. It was like a fish in water, right? Like you're just a fish in water. And so you think everybody, but then actually the turning point for me was when I got pregnant with my son. I don't know what happened, but something shifted within me and I felt peace for the first time in my life. And I was like, oh, wait. You mean that anxiety that I felt for decades, that's not normal? So thank you for saying that. Yeah, I think an acknowledgement to anyone who's listening to this, that you don't have to live in a place of survival mode. Like you can truly thrive. And I found a way to do that for myself and then share that with others.
Yeah, and I really appreciate your story because it really reflects the giving and the receiving dynamics, right? You, by giving your service to others, you are able to receive the healing, and vice versa. When you practiced healing yourself, you were able to give that much more back. So it's like this constant cycle that grows in on itself. And a lot of us are holding ourselves back from entering freely into the both or either spectrum. So I just wanted to acknowledge that as well.
Yes. That's actually the biggest misconception. I wrote a book. It was called Love Reiki Vibration about 8 years ago. And I had an energy magazine contact me because they said it was like one of the missing pieces of Reiki, because I have heard so many people say to me in energy work, it's like, oh, but don't you feel exhausted after this? And when you're channeling this energy, I always tell my students it's exponentially more powerful for you. That's actually the true secret of how I healed myself, is that as I was working with other people, I healed. Because I think at some point you come to this realization as a true healer that you can't heal anyone else except yourself. And what you're really doing is creating a space that soothes, I call it assuage people. And when you create this space of where you're assuaging people, then they can actually, their vibration can raise and they can heal themselves. So.
Yeah, I think there's this concept of when healers tap into this universal, limitless well of unconditional love or divinity, that's not just a metaphor, right? It's like if we're feeling exhausted, then we may be maybe unknowingly channeling our own energy and not actually like allowing it to flow from this infinite well. And healers, there's like this hollow bone concept where we just allow it to pass through. And this is a byproduct, literally like a side effect of us channeling, is that we also heal ourselves.
Yeah. You get it, girl. You get it. Yeah, for 100%. There's all kinds of like little hacks that I did when I was first learning this. I started to realize like when I would work with a client early in the morning, then it would set my day up for like perfection. And it's because as I was assisting somebody else on their healing journey, it just lifted me up so much. And I love remembering back to that, because anytime I am off or not feeling well, it's like, I think our natural tendency is to like pull back and pull in. Like I've had so many students tell me like, I feel like a fraud. I don't want to come and provide assists at this workshop because I'm feeling off. And I'm like, no, you're missing the point. It's like, that's how you can come back into alignment. You do not have, there's reverence for the practice, and I teach people how to like center themselves and create that it's a lifestyle, right? But it's okay to be off and then come center yourself and give freely to other people. That's how you heal. That's how you heal.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I noticed it within myself as well, like this rejection of one's own challenges, or we can call them shadow parts or darkness or negativity, negative mindset type of things that kind of holds us back, or self-sabotage, or just exhaustion on a physical level. And we sort of tend to judge and minimize that and not show those weaknesses, so to speak, to others. And we think that it makes us a fraud or an imposter, or that we can never be successful or healer or heal ourselves. And like, it just plants a lot of seeds of doubt. And the reality is that we are all a mixed bag of these white and shadow parts. And just by existing here in this 3D reality, we have to go through it. And if we didn't have to go through it, we would not be able to relate to other people that are going through it. So this is the work. Like you have to do it.
Yeah, that's 100% true. Just working with so many healers over the last 15 years, I've noticed a couple different things. Like one of the things I've noticed is that basically people are hiding or waiting for permission, right? Because of that imposter syndrome. And everyone has such a unique light. And just like, if you thought about the person who changed your life the most, whether they were a teacher or a healer, they at one point in time were in that same phase. And if they didn't step forward, that would be such a shame, right? I think the other thing that I noticed in healers, two other things is, one is healers don't charge enough. They don't charge enough. And it's like, they don't realize that charging low prices actually just creates dysfunction in your clients or your students. Like, so if I could set you free on anything, if you're listening to this, I want to set you free, that the more you charge, the more they'll actually transform. Like, I love the quote that says, the transformation is in the transaction. And that has been such a powerful shift in my business. Okay. So like, I teach people how to create premium offers as healers and set that in the center of their business, because like the statistics, I don't know how far you want to go into the statistics. Let me just throw out a couple things, because I think it's fun. First of all, nowadays people consume 80% of their waking hours is consumption. But the truth is, and the reason why I point that out is that what it's doing with that 80% consumption is it is creating a society where we don't implement, we just consume, right? And so the stats are that if you have a program that's 4 weeks long, 94% of the people will not finish it. That means only 6 people get the result. And that's very heartening to me, because I am not just in it for the income. I'm in it for the impact and the influence. I want to make a difference. I want to change people's lives like my life has been changed. And so if you're only serving at the end 6% or 6 people out of 100, then you're really not having the impact you need. And the only thing that changes these stats is when you're offering a high ticket offer or a premium offer. So you're putting a higher value, because your price denotes value, whether you know it or not. So I think that's the other thing that people, healers in particular, other people, like, because sometimes I'll say to my students, this will set you free. A business is about making money, right? It's not a hobby. It's not a hobby. And like, if you can't like fully step into that, you're going to burn yourself out.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. The price point really communicates a specific value, even if it's perceived value. It's very important to hold that tension for a person and the container so they can go and step in and commit to themselves. And this is just a representation of their intentionality and their work ethic. So I have found the same in my business, that when you hold somebody to that level of tension, it's actually caring for them enough so they can believe in themselves and invest in themselves in order to follow through, because that's the biggest block too, like following the steps and trusting the process.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, you maybe have a similar story, but I remember the very first time I invested in in a premium, like coaching consulting container, and it was $25,000. And up until that point, like, I might have only spent hundreds, not even 1,000. And here I am spending 25,000. And the coolest thing of what I realized when I did that is that, like, I was investing that 25 in me, not in the coach. Like, this is about when you invest. I think that's one of the other things that new entrepreneurs don't understand, is that when you invest in yourself, you're almost like telling the universe, like, I'm serious, like, I'm ready. Like, I didn't invest that $25,000 in that coach. I invested that $25,000 in me. And after I did that, like, my whole life changed. My entire life changed. And so I would say also to anybody listening that, like, invest in yourself. Invest, like, when your circle changes, your circumstances change. So I know, like, if they're listening to this podcast and they're part of your community, they found a tribe where they feel valued. And I think that's like one of the biggest things you can do as a new entrepreneur.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to go back to something that you shared in your journey about having that supplement and drug interaction. And as a pharmacist and an herbalist myself, and I know a lot of the listeners are as well familiar with drug-herb interactions or drug-drug interactions, it's sort of like this topic that in mainstream is sort of normal, because this is the type of medicine that we practice, the pill for every ill. And even the nutraceutical or the herbal industry can be pharmaceutical adjacent if that's the way that somebody just treats symptoms or patterns with additional supplements. And so I want to ask you, from that experience and you becoming from healed to healer, right? Like, what are your biggest takeaways about, you mentioned the 5-step process. What should we be looking at? What are we missing in mainstream or even some alternative practices?
Oh, I would love to share my 5-step program. But before I do, when I knew I was going to share my origin story, I thought it was just going to be even more powerful to have that conversation with you because of your background and what had happened to me. I'll just dive in a little bit more because it might be interesting for your group when I don't normally dive in more to it. So what had happened was I was taking different herbal medicines. And like I said, I was a mess. I didn't know what I was doing, and I was not under any care because every time I went to the doctor, they just tried to prescribe me medicine. So I ended up taking this one supplement. It was called GABA, GABA, a neurotransmitter. And I was taking that. And I actually found some relief from the anxiety taking that. And then what had happened was I then was prescribed Seraphim, which I didn't realize at the time was an antidepressant, which I kept telling my doctor I didn't want, but eventually I took it. She told me it wasn't an antidepressant. I won't get into that. But what had happened is it interacted and it caused serotonin syndrome. And they actually admitted me into the psychiatric ward because they were very concerned for my safety, and only released me. I was only in there for less than 24 hours. They only released me. Nothing had ever happened to me like this before. They only released me because they had realized that it was an interaction of the medicine that was causing me to react that way, and sent me home only under the direction of a family member watching me 24/7. And it took me about 5 or 6 weeks to self-regulate. But really, it took years for me to get past that feeling. Like, I remembered the smell in the air, all of those things would bring me back to that moment when I had that serotonin syndrome. So yes, so I don't know if you wanted to comment on that before I jumped into the 5 steps, but.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. Is it Seroquel that you were taking?
I think it was called Seraphim.
Okay. I'm just not familiar with that one. Okay, that's all right.
Yeah. And again, this was like 15 years ago, and
maybe it was a brand name.
Yeah. Like, I don't know exactly what it was, but it was just another name for, I think, Prozac or antidepressants. Okay. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. Yeah. And my commentary is never about about taking medicine or not taking medicine. I just share my story of what happened to me. You know what I mean? Not as like, what other people should do. But yeah, I think, the 5 steps.
I'll just jump in and say, I completely agree with the medication. Like, sometimes acute medications administered properly and appropriately for a limited amount of time save lives. And I appreciate being alive in this time where we can access those pretty readily. And I'm also of the mindset that if that's the only option that you're being given for, like, not an acute case scenario for a chronic condition, that's just not true. There are always other options.
Yeah, I love that you like framed it as the acute versus chronic, because that's what I talk about. Like, I always say, like, when my son broke his ankle, like, I didn't just like perform energy work on his ankle. Like, I took him to a doctor, they reset his bone, and, the cast was put on. So, yeah, I love that you shared that. So thank you. The 5 steps that I realized after 15 years of like what works, and I've probably tried every different energy modality, and I've noticed that different people resonate with different things, and I think that's great. The 5 things that I really like. So the first step is like just this whole concept of charging your cells or raising your vibration. There's different ways to say it, and I won't go fully into this, but I've done extensive study with this man. His name's Bruce Tanio, and he did work out of Eastern State University. He's no longer with us. And basically what he said was, and there's all different kinds of studies about raising your vibration and charging your cells. This one's my favorite. That a human healthy body vibrates between 62 and 72 megahertz per second. And so if you're vibrating within that range, disease and harmful microorganisms cannot survive or thrive in your body. And, because of what happened to me 15 years ago, I have dedicated my life to living lifestyle choices that raise their vibration. And that's why I always say nothing in life is neutral. Everything is either raising your vibration or lowering your vibration. So I think foundationally what I teach my students is charge your cells, raise your vibration. And there are now frequency devices that can do that in the background, like the biohacking. For 15 years, I didn't rely on any biohacking or any devices, because they weren't readily available to raise my vibration or charge my cells. But now, there are those out there. So you either need to do it with a biohacking device, or you need to live like chronic, consistent, deliberate lifestyle choices. And I know I'm preaching to the choir out here. So number 1 is charging your cells. Number 2 is dropping the brain states. And you had already mentioned it, like living in fight or flight or survival mode has been so normalized. And the stats, if you know about Dr. Joe Dispenza, which I know a lot of people do, like 70% of the time, the average person is in this high beta state, which is fight or flight. So like, how can we drop the brain states, right? And you could even just drop it into low or mid beta. It doesn't even have to be alpha or theta, but so that's what I train my students and then my healers to do that. Then the third step is dislodging the trauma that's stored within your body. And, I've studied under Eileen McCusick, who is like one of the leading edge in tuning forks and sound therapy. And we literally are carrying this trauma trapped in our body, and we need to, dislodge it and then circulate it so we can better, what is the words I want to say? Have a better relationship with the trauma, right? And so that's step 3. And then 4 is assuage and soothe. And that's through channeled energy. And a lot of people are familiar with Reiki. And I am a Reiki master and have taught Reiki for 15 years. But the channeled energy that I use with my students is called Zanjay. And it's very similar to Reiki. And then the last step is transmissions, like teaching my students transmissions that they can give to their clients to help further raise the vibration specific to them. So yeah, the framework that I use is just relying on the modalities that I've seen the most changes over the last 15 years working with thousands of clients.
Wow. Amazing. I am so impressed that you have built this system, that you've tried and tested and done your research and worked with the leading experts in these fields. And honestly, as long as somebody has a comprehensive system and they know it works, it doesn't have to be, one framework versus another. They're all frameworks, and they probably all tackle similar things, and the order of events, I would say, matters. So we want to, focus on the priorities and what's going to really inhibit or continue to sabotage somebody. We want to focus on those things first, usually, and then add in layer and layer and layers. So it sounds like your system does that and addresses the bottom of the pyramid, right? And then you just keep on ascending up.
I love that. And I love that you even say that because, when I look at my journey, I didn't have a framework. I was just trying to live to the next day. Right. And so I was figuring it out all on my own. And it took me years and years. And so I do agree. I think there's a lot of healers out there that have done their own little studies, right, and tested out what has worked for them. And God bless anyone doing that and sharing it, because, in my education and wellness retreat that I have in Ohio, we have 250 events a year. We have thousands of people that come into our space, and they are literally looking for the map, right? Here's what they're looking for. They're looking to compress time. They don't want to take 15 years like I did to heal themselves. They want to say, how can I heal myself? How can I do the work and in a proven system? And I think that's what Reiki was for me initially. And then I also started to realize, first of all, Reiki saved my life. So please do not misinterpret this as talking bad about Reiki. Reiki changed my life, but it was also created in 1862 and has everything evolves, right? And so there has to be an evolution for us as human beings of what can really make the biggest difference. I like to be on the leading edge and continue to be on the leading edge of what is working well for people so that I can compress time.
Yeah, I hear you on that. And right now, in the time that we're living in, we have a lot of factors to contend with that are working against us, unfortunately. You even mentioned it, the 80% consumption. And that goes for everything, right? When we are just pulled in a million different directions and we have all this technology and screen time and all these distractions that really distract us from what we're doing here, what we are here to do, and also our healing journey, and also our impact and cultivating or creating something for ourselves, right? So when we're stuck in that mode, and then we have all the other toxins and environmental issues and the societal issues and political issues, it creates a lot of layers that we're actually going to have to go through. And so we need to continue to advance and evolve systems and make them more comprehensive. And again, follow a specific sequence. So I love that you've identified these 5 important steps. And I'm curious if I can ask you a couple of follow-up questions on them.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I just like say just an analogy that you made me think of, and then you can ask me whatever questions you want. What I think the first one, charging the cells, it's like all you have to think about is like, do you have a charger for your cell phone? You know what I mean? Like, and not only do you charge your cell phone, you don't take it to the Apple store to charge it. You know, I don't want people to just rely on me. Like, I don't want to be the Apple store. I want to teach and empower people how to charge their own cells, right?
Yeah. So it's like teaching a man to fish, right?
Yes.
Yeah, you don't want to be providing the fish. You just want people to be independent or interdependent, but not necessarily codependent on a specific method or person. So yeah, for the first step, I'm curious if you can give us like a couple of your top go-to lifestyle tips. Again, maybe things that maybe mainstream is missing. Like, what are those things that you turn to charge your cells?
Yeah. So it's so funny because I just mentioned we have 250 events, and it's like people always ask me like, what should I do? Like, what should I go to? And so it usually requires me a couple of questions of asking people, because you really want people, whatever their practice is, you want them to love it. Because if they don't, they're not going to do it. But I will tell you, like, breath, we have a breath workshop. It's called Theta Breath, and it's using conscious circular breathing. And it's the most intense thing that I've ever experienced. Like, as a yoga teacher, this is a funny story. As a yoga teacher for 15 years, like, I understand breath and movement and how powerful it could be. But the first time I was invited to explore conscious circular breathing and knew that I was going to have to manipulate my breath and override my natural breath for 28 minutes, I was like, I don't want to do that. Like, that doesn't sound fun to me. And I ended up doing it because it was my friend's 50th birthday and that's what she wanted to do. And it literally changed my entire life. So I would say breath sometimes is a cliche offering to people, but it's so powerful, especially if you're doing like a powerful breath, like conscious circular breathing. And I would say if anyone in your audience is like interested in learning more about that, like, reach out to me because it's very specific. I think nature is another one. Like, we offer Shinrin-yoku and forest bathing, and that like cannot be underestimated. Again, something that might sound cliche, but cannot be underestimated. But the biohacking device that I use, that like after literally looking for a decade, I found something that's called Healy, Healy. And it's been one of another really turning point in my business and in my personal life. Because if you are a healer, like all of your healers out there that are listening, if you incorporate something like Healy into your practice, you are not only going to set yourself apart, but you won't even like the difference that you will see being made in people's lives. And again, if anyone's interested in that, like, they can reach out to me and I can tell them more about that. But yeah, that's what I've noticed is very powerful in like charging people's cells. I mean, grounding, right? Grounding is the number way to charge your cells. Like, put your hand on a tree, put your feet on the ground with no shoes on, and it will change your life. I've actually personally done my own scientific studies of like inflammation that I had in my body, and like logged my grounding, and like I had lower back pain for years, and it literally dissipated by using grounding.
Yeah, those are such powerful and, like you said, sometimes underestimated or banal modalities that you mentioned. And I'm glad you brought them up, because I was thinking, obviously everybody knows like good, clean water and air and filters and nutritious, nutrient-dense foods, and stopping, inflammatory foods, or just things that we have around us, like even screens and EMFs and all that stuff. So I'm sure it's all comprehensive, but I'm glad you mentioned those specific modalities, because they do sound simple, and yet people are not engaging in those practices. People are not spending time outside. They're not getting the sunlight, the healthy sunlight, right, in the morning hours, or they're not exposing themselves to the natural rhythm and circadian clock. And so I'm very happy that you brought those up. And then from the other modalities, maybe if you can share what people are missing. Like I know dropping into theta waves, there's some talk about that, but yeah, maybe if we can go through like one key example of how one may progress through these stages. So if you can give an example of dropping into theta.
Yeah, and I think that we all have at some point in our lives like dropped into it. It's like I almost refer to it as like lucid dreaming. Like you kind of are sleeping, but you also know what's going on. And it's actually the beautiful state of like this quantum where you can actually like create and manifest in this space, which is another reason why I love theta and theta breath and all these kinds of things. The truth is that, you know, when you're using my 5-part system and using Zanjay as like this channeled energy that's flowing through you, it's going to work regardless of what brain state you're in. But when we speak to this whole concept of empowering other people, I want them to understand that they are living in high beta and that there are simple things that can just drop them into these lower alpha theta states. And when people first start practicing with me, whether it's in theta breath or whether it's in like a one-on-one session, private session with me, you know, if they're used to living in high beta every day, 70% of the time, and the other 30% of the time is just delta when they're sleeping. So their whole waking hours are in high beta. They can't easily drop into alpha and theta. And that's not an expectation that I want to put on people who are just learning this. I want them to say, okay, well, how can I just drop into low and mid beta, right? Like, how can I just drop into these more analytical, logical states that aren't survival mode, right? So that's like the first step, is just having them understand the brain states in general and how they can just like kind of slow it down and go into low and mid beta. And then eventually, the more they start slowing down and coming into silence and practicing these things and changing their lifestyles, they're going to naturally be able, like I can go very quickly into alpha and theta, right? Because I've practiced this for so long. So yes, I sometimes am in high beta and in particular low and mid beta, but then I can also just like almost flip the switch and drop down. And people cannot do that unless it's a practice in their lives. So I think that's actually an important part to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Practice makes perfect, and repetition is the key to anything. So makes sense. Now, I do want to cover the moving through trauma aspect, because trauma has been such a big word, and there's been COVID with the collective trauma, and now there's just so much strife. And again, the information overload of everything that's going wrong in the world, and then personal trauma that a person may have experienced or witnessed. So what's like the key thing that needs to happen for a person to move with their or through their trauma?
Yeah. So what I teach in the method that I have is called high frequency healing. And so what we do is, first of all, it can come out in two different ways. It can be just by talking to the clients and seeing where their chronic issue is, so that they might say, you know, like my chronic issue is in my left hip or whatever. And then we associate that with a certain, like I call it suffering, like different representations of suffering. So like a hip might be anger as opposed to like grief or sadness. Like what is the suffering and where is it being in the body? So it might be evidence that the actual client tells you, right? The other way is through the chakras. Like you can test the chakras. Chakras are an indication of your personal frequency. They're an indication of how charged your cells are in different areas of your life. And the way in which I teach chakra is just based off of the data that I've had over the last 15 years. In working with thousands of clients, I've actually created the data of like, when this chakra is closed, it's associated with this. So I have a different way in which we work with chakras, and I won't get into any of that here. But basically, when you determine where the trauma is stored within the body, then you use a weighted tuning fork to dislodge that trauma. And so it's fascinating because I've seen the patterns over the last 15 years. And that's also what, hey, healers out there, like, right? Like, keep track of the patterns, because the patterns are telling you something. And that's why I always tell my students, like, keep a journal when you become a healer. And like, sometimes people balk at that. Like, I'm not saying keep a journal so that you can share, like, brain dump. I'm saying keep a journal, because then you can go back and look at patterns that are happening in your practice. That's how I've been able to determine all of the things I have over the last 15 years, is because I saw patterns, and then I identified what those patterns have meant across, a wide range of clients.
Yeah. That's literally science, the scientific method, and putting the research in and tracking it. And I agree. It's kind of a difficult commitment on top of everything else that you're trying to achieve, also keeping track and looking at the metrics. And again, when you're a business owner and a healer, it does make sense, and it adds benefit, because then you won't have the perspective, and then you might get even more into imposter syndrome when you're not seeing a positive trajectory because you're not actually measuring it. So I love that. And I also want to cover the last step with transition.
Can I just say something?
Yeah.
Because I love that you said, yeah, that's literally science, because I am like an energy teacher of vibration, right? But to me, like, I also have a little bit of type A personality, like my degree's in accounting, like I like to create a mean spreadsheet, like I get excited and I nerd out on data. And so I love the point that you made, is that, some people might not be that. They might be more of on the creative side, and it might be very hard for them to love data or see patterns. And maybe you're not your audience, because it sounds like your audience are probably going to be more on that side. But you just made me laugh when you said that. Like, that's literally science. And I'm like, yes.
Yeah, my audience is probably very familiar. And I still feel like sometimes we're not connecting the dots with spiritual or healing modalities and the scientific method. And literally what you just said about tracking patterns encompasses everything. Like, everything in life, everything in nature is a pattern, whether you're calling it science and running a clinical trial, or doing what you said and just observe and note it down. Our ancestors did it. This is how astronomy and also astrology came to be, which are sister sciences that look at things a little bit differently, but it comes from tracking and understanding where we are in relation to everything else. So I think some people are just not drawing the similarities, and I wanted to just state that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And so I'm curious about your last step with transmission, because that's a word that maybe some of the scientific community may not be so familiar with. So could you explain that process for us?
Yeah, let me ask you this question. Are you familiar with the word attunement, or is that also more of a foreign word?
Yeah, I would say explain that too.
Okay. So I think an attunement, I like to use the word transmissions instead of attunement, but basically what it is that it's definitely a spiritual concept, an energetic concept of where you're kind of passing on a certain, well, let me just talk about it from like me as a teacher to a student. I'm passing on like this lineage, like this energy, this way in which, I've created a way to raise people's vibrations or charge their cells, right? So it's an attunement process. It's a transmission from teacher to student. So that's one way. But then the transmissions are also from practitioner to client. So there are specific transmissions that we use in the high frequency healing method, where we're allowing them to almost connect to their higher self, their internal wisdom. And again, it goes back to empowerment for me. It's like, do you know how many people have come to me and they want me to tell them the answers? And it's like, I can only unlock the truth that's within you. And my answers are different than your answers. So I can't give you my answers, but I can help unlock the truth that's within you. And that's really what attunements and transmissions are about. It's like honoring their lived wisdom and unlocking it for them. And I can just be a catalyst to do that. Ooh, like I'm just going to say, whoa, that was good. I'm just going to pat myself on the back and say like, sometimes I don't know how things are going to come out of me. And I always say, let me speak to the people that I'm speaking with so that they can hear what I'm saying. And I don't know if that made sense to you, but it felt really good to me.
Yeah, absolutely. It actually reminded me of the previous step that you talked about with the tuning fork and how we are coming to the same vibrational level. So we're like up leveling to the person, the teachers or the practitioners' frequency and vibration, and just being in their presence. If they're more in the frequency of love, let's say, or some other higher vibrational pattern, we naturally get affected by each other. And so it's like walking in a room and just feeling like a bad vibe in a restaurant or something. And when you feel a good vibe, it's similar. And so when the teacher is in that positive state and that enlightenment or transcendence of some sort, then they can pass it on to you. And we're all picking up on those things, whether we're conscious of it or not.
Yeah, it's like you're the bridge is really what it is. You're the connector, you're the bridge. It's not that they can't do it on their own, but you're just almost like jump starting like a battery, like you're just the bridge or the connector. And I love what you were just saying about like that's science too. It's called entrainment, right? In sound therapy, it's referred to as entrainment. Yeah. And I love it.
Yeah. And I also just want to repeat back what you said several times. You mentioned that when you are investing in yourself, let's say financially, or using any sort of resources to jumpstart, right? Or to use a coach or trainer or some kind of modality that will help be that enzyme, that catalyst for you, that's part of the growth process, right? So unless you're willing to invest either time, money, energy, or any combination of those things and get a person who can teach you so that you can go there faster, then you're not going to be able to jumpstart yourself, right? You're going to need to invest in one of those things. And ideally, again, a combination in order to progress and get really the clarity, right, of what you yourself are seeking, right? Because we're not here to force anybody to do anything. Our mission as healers, as teachers, is to help you honor your own growth, whatever you're seeking, whatever pattern that is for you, and help you to develop that yourself, not for us to be carbon copies of anyone else.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would say right now, anyone listening to this, like when you're done listening to this, go find something you can invest in yourself. Like get in a room with people that are going to lift you up, inspire you, whether it's one person, a coach, a group, a mastermind, like it's hands down will change your life. Investing in
I love it. Yeah, this is actually bringing us right to our rapid round fire of questions. So question number one was going to be, what's the number one thing somebody could do right now to improve their quality of life? And I think you just answered that beautifully, but if you have anything else to add.
Well, I think that is what you can do to improve your business. Let me just say that. Like if you want your business to take off, invest in yourself. I would say like if you personally are looking for something, it's just to realize that nothing in life is neutral, right? Everything is either raising or lowering your vibration. So start to just like be mindful of what you're doing. I always say like if you had a Fitbit, let's go back to the Bruce Tanio of like if you're in the healthy range of 62 to 72 megahertz per second, if you had a Fitbit on and it actually calculated your vibration and it started to dip, like what would you do in that moment? You would acknowledge what you were doing and you would probably be a lot more mindful, right? So, but yeah, I guess that's what I would say.
Yeah, I think everything starts with that awareness and intention. So that's great. And then just getting in a room with other people and getting in their energy and their frequency is also just speaking to some of those steps that we were just talking about. So that's perfect.
Wow.
Okay, question 2. What's a fun fact or hobby about yourself that maybe people are not aware of?
Gosh. Well, it's so funny because I would say that most people would consider me a workaholic, and it's because I think working is fun. So when people ask me, like, what do I do in my outside world? It's like I do all the things, right? I have an education and retreat center that's like 100 feet from me. So every night I walk down there and I do something. So I have a pretty boring life, and there would be nothing that would shock people that I could tell them. Yeah.
All right, cool. I'm sure if people are not aware of some of those everyday things that are everyday for you, they might be shocked.
Probably. Well, like I would say, like I'm boring. Like the only thing I ever do is drink water. I've just decided to live lifestyle choices that, I guess sometimes I binge and people are surprised. Like I like to binge watch TV, and my favorite show is Madam Secretary, which is really, really weird and bizarre. And I've probably watched it like 6 times through. And my husband is like, "Are you seriously watching Madam Secretary again?" But what I love about it is she's such a am I allowed to say ass? She's such a badass. And I understand she's a fictional character, but she's such a badass. But then when she goes home to her family, you just realize like she's a normal person. And I don't know, there's something so magical about that, is that we can be badass business owners, but then come home and our family's like our soft place to land. And so I don't know, I'm just obsessed with that show.
Yeah, I love when people share guilty pleasures. So thank you for that. I'm personally taking a break from watching anything, but as soon as I'm back on my screen time, I will definitely give that a watch.
Okay. Let me know what you think about it.
I will. Yeah, I love those kind of characters. So my last and final question for you is, if people are resonating with this content, maybe they are in a place where they need healing, or maybe they are ready to step into a more entrepreneurial journey, where can they learn more about your work and how can you help them potentially?
Yeah. Well, I don't, you had mentioned maybe there was some people in your community in Ohio. What I would say is, like, if you're in Ohio and you like come to our retreat center, come to our wellness center, we have people that travel like across the United States actually to come to some of our certifications. So if you're close to us, like, come on down. What I would say though is that, like, I also play on the internet streets, right? Like, so I do trainings. There's something I wanted to mention, like, as healers, I don't know if a lot of your people own brick and mortars or if they're living on the internet. And I live in both worlds. That the learning is going to grow to $1 trillion by 2030 on the internet. Like, you know what I mean? So a lot of people come to me and say, "Man, I want that brick and mortar like you." And I'm like, hey, like, there's nothing wrong with the internet streets. So if you're looking for me on the internet streets, you can find me at CourtneyMartinelli.com. I also have a YouTube channel. I have an Instagram account. Like, if you just type Cortney Martinelli, like, a bunch of things will pop up. Probably Shine, Ohio might be the first thing that pops up. But yeah, I have a free masterclass coming up on November 6th. And really, I'm just going to talk about the 8 traps that keep business owners from, like, growing their business. So if anybody wants to come down on November 6th, I would love to have you there. And you can find that on CourtneyMartinelli.com.
All right, beautiful. I'll have all of that in the show notes. And where in Ohio are you based for those locals?
So I'm actually in Kent, Ohio, which is it's in between Columbus and Cleveland.
Amazing. All right. Well, brilliant. I really loved having you on. I loved our conversation and how you've shown your light, and the journey that you shared, and your mission is just absolutely beautiful. So thanks again for being on, and I look forward to keeping in touch.
So fun. Thank you for having me. You're a very gifted interviewer, so I appreciate you.
Thank you, Cortney. Have a good day. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Holistic Pharmacy Podcast, and I truly hope you enjoyed the show. If you learned something useful in this episode, please consider giving the show a 5-star rating and a sincere review so that more people can find it, or share it with a friend directly. To get in touch with me, you can find me on social media by looking up my name, Marina Buksov, or email me at marina@rawfork.com. Take good care and see you soon.